But we begin this morning on Capitol Hill, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is set to meet privately with Republican and Democratic lawmakers to request more support in the fight against Russia. President Biden will host him at the White House this afternoon. The president has already asked Congress for another $24 billion in military and humanitarian aid, but some lawmakers say it is too much. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has said Ukraine funding should be debated as a standalone bill and not be tied to funding the government.
Okay, and we're just showing live pictures now of President Zelenskyy on Capitol Hill, walking through the hallways. He's getting ready for a day of meeting with lawmakers. You can see right now, right next to him is the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, as he is continuing to make his way through the halls of Capitol Hill. Nikole, I'm going to bring you in. We can talk a little bit over these pictures. You're following all of this from the Capitol. There he goes. Nikole, this is a really important day for President Zelenskyy. I presume that he's going to be sort of meeting one-on-one with members of the House, perhaps Senate. He's trying to win them over and convince them that investing in the fight against Russia is a worthwhile investment.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's definitely going to be a sales pitch from President Zelenskyy. What's notable is that, over here in the House, he will primarily be meeting with Speaker McCarthy and Leader Jeffries, who you noted there, and only a small group of lawmakers, primarily chairs and ranking members of some of the key committees that are involved with Ukraine in some shape or form in terms of policy. But that is much different than what we will see over in the Senate, where the president is set to meet with all senators in the old Senate chamber. Now, I asked Speaker McCarthy about that, why the differential, why the full House isn't meeting with the president, and what he said is, he doesn't have control over scheduling, and so, this is a meeting which I'm told will be more of a discussion with these House lawmakers and leaders that is happening at this hour, a real exchange back and forth about the merits of this war. That is something that the Speaker has emphasized. He kind of wants to know what the plan is, what the strategy is, since many of his members are wary, and as you mentioned, of course, the president really expected to try to sell lawmakers on this plan for more funding so that he can keep fighting against this Russian aggression.
As you point out, some Republicans are lukewarm when it comes to their support. The U.S. has provided the lion's share of the money for this fight against Russia, and some senators want to know exactly how that's being spent. You spoke to a few, and I want to play some of the sound.
I supported the first $40 billion because I thought there might have been a moment of time very early on when Russia was in retreat that maybe Vladimir Putin might have been convinced by a show of unity that this was foolish, he ought to stop it, he's not going to win. But again, now this is 20 months into this. He's not giving.
You think it's time to pump the brakes?
I think it's time to, with effective diplomacy, and again, we don't have the A-team on the field here right now. We need to move toward some agreed settlement to end this war, end the slaughter, end the destruction.
So that was Republican Ron Johnson that you were talking to. No one wants to throw good money after bad, but it certainly appears as if Ukraine is making some incremental gains, and you wouldn't want to pull support at a time when, they could be turning the corner. I don't know. What I do know is sometimes personal face-to-face visits make a difference. Different than a phone call, different than a speech. So could sitting down with President Zelenskyy change the minds of some Republican lawmakers?
Well, I think we'll have to see. I mean, again, he will not be really meeting with some of the more critical members of Republicans here in the House, who are probably the ones who have those questions for the president. So it kind of nixes that opportunity. But certainly in the Senate, we know that members had a briefing yesterday. Obviously, they'll hear from the president today. I mean, look, a lot of the reticence is, as you point out, the U.S. has already provided the lion's share of aid, some $112 billion. And so in the case case of Senator Johnson, he's saying, look, I supported $40 billion, but how much more can we ultimately give? He thinks there needs to be some kind of quiet diplomatic resolution between both sides. That is what he would like to see. I also talked to Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, who also has been very supportive of the efforts in Ukraine and continues to be, but he said, there is support weakening among the public, and, we have to also listen to our constituents, and maybe instead of writing a big blank check, maybe this is something that we have to do more incrementally. Democrats writ large believe that the president's request for this $24 billion should be supported, but as we have noted time and again, this really is a key sticking point, particularly in the midst of this government funding fight, where right now, at least here in the House, that Ukraine funding is not part of a short-term spending package.
Yeah, one of the unfortunate realities for President Zelenskyy is that he may very well be wrapped up in domestic issues, domestic politics, the wrangling over the budget, and it may have very little to actually do with him and his needs and the support that Americans have for Ukraine. So let's talk about this looming government shutdown. We've got a little over a week to go. What's the latest on any possible resolution?
Oh, well, the Speaker says that he continues to make progress with his members. We know that House Republicans met for several hours yesterday. They kind of have a new proposal now on the table to hold top-line spending around $1.47 trillion. That is kind of in line with their Limit, Save, Grow Act that they were pushing back in the spring in the midst of all those debt limit deal negotiations. That is something more conservative members of his conference have been pushing. So for now, it seems the Speaker is aligning himself, or at least kind of giving in to some of the conservative requests that have been coming forth. But that being said, even if the Speaker can move a new package, it's likely to be dead on arrival in the Senate. And so once again, we're kind of at this issue of loggerheads between the House and the Senate, with now just a little over a week to go.
Yep, clock is ticking, but that's how they like it. They're like me when I was in school.
I don't know if they do.
It feels like it, because I was always waiting until, the night before to finish my assignment, and I feel like that's what they do for everything down there.
But
maybe I could be a lawmaker.
The concern is that this is becoming the new normal, and, government can't function. You have federal workers who are, wondering, am I going to have to work the week after this, or am I going to sit home and be furloughed? I mean, members have to, their weekend plans get changed because now they're going to have to stay and kind of work through this. So it does have an impact, whether on a very small scale or a large scale. And that is part of why, and I don't mean to go on too much longer, but that is part of why there was this desire to have a broader appropriations package, do things the way they used to, but because they can't, that's why we're now back in this situation.
Ah, the good old days, Nikole. Thank you very much.
You bet.